research, and we delve in and out of this. Self-compassion is really, really big on this journey, okay? So, and it really, really links into yoga, particularly that one of the 8 limbs of yoga. Well, it's not one of the 8 limbs on its own. One of the 8 limbs is the yamas and the niyamas, which are like do's and don'ts. And in the niyamas, it's non-violence, ahimsa. A means not, and himsa means violence. So it basically don't go out and be a dick and be violent to other people, but very much so more kind of not recent writings, but like it was interpreted as very much non-violence to other people, but actually there's a big element on non-violence to yourself and like love for yourself and not being too hard on you. So the ancient yogis had that all sussed. But there's a lot more modern kind of, I think we're kind of coming back to that. And there's actual therapies written all around the concept of ahimsa and non-violence. So there's one called compassion focused therapy, CFT, as it like not CBT, CFT, written by a guy called Paul Gilbert. And do you know what it comes back to again? Like this fight or flight or freeze that we don't want you to live in, right? And we definitely don't want you to live in if you're trying to conceive, because it's not the place that's going to happen, because you need to be like just like the digestion, this theory behind digestion, if we're diverting the body's attention to digestion, it's not like basically your reproductive system is the last in the pile. Do you know what I mean? Like eating, digesting, protecting yourself from threats, that's what your body will deal with first. And then layered under that, if everything's all fine and we're all relaxed, conception's the same and birthing's the same as well. I talk to this when I work with pregnant ladies as well. Birthing is exactly the same. It's not going to be easy if we're giving attention to all those other things, right? So, so when we criticize ourselves, we're tapping into the body's threat defense system, which is sometimes referred to your reptilian brain. So the fight or flight is actually quite your reptilian brain. Amongst the ways we can react to perceived danger, the threat defense system is the quickest and most easily triggered, which means self-criticism is often our first reaction when things go wrong. Okay, so what is one of the first things that happens on a fertility journey is if things go wrong, we self-criticize and question everything. And we've just talked about it. It's the natural thing is self-criticism, right? So this threat defense system evolved so that when we perceive a threat, our amygdala, which registers danger in the brain, gets activated. We release cortisol and adrenaline and we get ready to fight, flee or freeze, okay? So when we're thinking of that, see, whenever I read about this, I'm like, but we're not being chased down by a tiger or anything, but whether we want to or not, we're still hardwired like that. We're still really hardwired. But the good thing is we're developed and we can learn techniques to try and unwind it all, right? So when we feel inadequate, our self-concept is threatened, and so we attack the problem, but the problem's ourselves, so you attack yourself, okay? So where was the thing I want to, this was the thing, right? So with self-criticism, this is like where you start to think, oh God, it is bad. With self-criticism, we are both the attacker and the attacked, right? So we're both. So how do we try and undo all that? So we want to activate the care system, right? So we want to try and get our bodies to not release cortisol and adrenaline. And when the care system's activated, so basically the way we advanced, right? So from reptilian brain to mammalian brain, mammals, the evolutionary advance of mammals is that mammalian young are born very immature and have a longer developmental period to adapt to their environment, right? So to keep infants safe during the vulnerable period, we developed this mammalian care system, right, which prompted parents and offspring to stay close, right? So when we were born, that's what we received, right? So we were receptors of this care system, which activates a hormone called oxytocin. It is big in conception. It's the hormone that's released when you have sex, right? It's big in birthing as well, which will be to come for you guys. And endorphins, okay, so those two hormones, oxytocin and endorphins, are released, and they help reduce stress and feed feelings of safety and security, right? And that, so it's not all doom and gloom, right? Attacker, attacked, all that kind of stuff. You're like, fuck, I'm like really fucking myself up here. But actually, as humans, we've got these wonderful responses that we can activate, right? Oxytocin, the love hormone, and endorphins, the natural feel-good opiates, like they're opiates, pain relieving. Okay, so how do we activate it? Okay, so I quite like this, right? So when we talk about this stress response, the fight, the flight, and the freeze, right? So this is when we break each one of them down, right? So the stress response of fight, right? What is that stress response when turned inwards, right? So the fight thing, it's self-criticism, right? So when we turn it inwards, it's self-criticism, right? So the way we activate the compassion response and the love hormone and everything like that is self-kindness. So we can activate self-kindness. So the antidote to fight is self-kindness. The flight thing, so this feeling of just wanting to run, believe it or not, we don't so much do that as actual physical running away, but we run away from things and we isolate ourselves. So that stress response as turned inwards is isolation. And I'm sure, and this is a key thing for this book, by the way, isn't a fertility book. It's just on mindful self-compassion. It's actually really good, mindful self-compassion workbook. We've worked on it together before. But when I'm reading it, it's just resonating for everything on this journey. So isolation, right? So the self-compassion response we can give ourselves is common humanity, right? Which is really going through fertility problems, like the isolation heightens because of stigma and taboo, and you can't just go about telling it. Well, you can if you want, but you don't because it feels a bit taboo, and you feel that you can't trigger that oxytocin response because you don't have the right tribe to talk about, which is why for us, not being alone in this journey is so key if we want to turn off all these stress hormones, right? And then the freeze. So we've done fight, that's self-criticism. Flight is isolating yourself. So just putting the world away and just isolating yourself. And the freeze response is rumination, going over things and over things and over things. And we do that as well. Well, I don't know, I'm speaking for you guys, but I'm just speaking from A, personal experience, and B, talking to hundreds of women who have been in your situation. So that rumination is what that stress response turned inward is. So what is the antidote to that? It's mindfulness. So you can already see what you're giving yourself in these classes. Self-kindness is coming from learning about the Yoga Sutras and ahimsa and non-violence. Common humanity is us talking to each other, and not even if you don't feel like talking in that week, you're physically doing the yoga with other people. So there's a circle of common humanity there. And the freeze response of rumination and thinking things over, we try and learn mindfulness techniques in yoga. That's what yoga is. It's essentially mindfulness. Mindfulness is more, personally, I think it's just a modern way of what ancient yogis knew all along, right? It's bringing yourself into the present and learning to let those thoughts pass by and just focus on the present moment. So that is our next hour. That's what we're going to do. It is just trying to be mindful in the present moment. Okay. Little thing on self-compassion.